Thank you.
Got it. Hi, I am Sarah Stowell. Thank you for joining us. And I'm going to share my screen in just a second. This is a small group, which is going to be really ideal for a book study. Let me click over here and then get started. So let me go ahead and hit share my screen. I got too many things going on. And then we will get started. Not what I meant to hit. Okay. So I am Sarah Stowell. I'm a principal at Morrilton Intermediate School. Just a little bit about us and how I'm involved in this work. And then Kelly, I'll pass it over to you. My school was part of the cohort 1 with the PLC grant with Solution Tree that came through. And it's some of the very best work that we've ever done. But I found out really early that if you are wanting to plan and prioritize your PLC at work, you're going to have to really build your capacity, and you're going to have to build the capacity in others. So I messed up early on and thought that I could do every bit of it on my own. And you can't. And I was very fortunate that I was able to have Karen Power, who is the author of this book. She served as a leadership coach in my building. And just a little bit about my connection to this book that we are sharing. She was actually finishing up the editing and the revising when she served in my building. So we got to be with her whenever this book was launched. And so I got to read an early copy of it, and it just changed everything that I did. So whenever Missy had asked about leading a book study with leadership, this was the book that I was so happy that we were going to use, because it's really transformed a lot of what we've done in our school. And then I wrangled Miss Kelly Fuller into doing this with me, because a book study is going to be really boring if it's one person talking the whole time. So Kelly, do you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll get going?
Yeah. Hey guys, I'm Kelly Fuller, and I'm an instructional facilitator at Howard Perrin Elementary in Benton, Arkansas. And just a little story of how our school got involved in just the PLC work and Solution Tree was that we were in cohort 2 through the PLC pilot. I know Sarah mentioned they were in cohort 1. We were in cohort 2. And so went through all the extensive training through that, and became a model PLC school, at the end of that time. And Sarah and I actually got to meet at Solution Tree, and like, just to kind of piggyback on how much she loves this book. Like, one of the first times I met her, that was one of the first questions. Like, I remember her saying, "Have you ever read this book?" So I know she loves this book, and lives by it too, with leading her school. So I'm excited to get to go on this journey with her as well.
Awesome. Yes, I do. I do peddle this book to anyone that will listen to me. Okay. So again, this is written by Jeannie Spiller and Karen Power. And today is just an overview of how the book is set up. I know that our time is precious, so we just wanted to do an overview and then give you a schedule of when we will be discussing each of the 8 areas. And then, so then you can join us for the areas that you're really interested in, and we'll kind of talk through that in a little bit. So before I get started, I just want to know who is joining us, and you can put it in the chat box if you want to, just who is joining us, and what your role is, and why you wanted to go on this journey with us with this book. So you can just go ahead and let us know. Nicole, what role do you serve? Are you principal? Oh, it says it, principal. I should really read what it says. So if you are, one thing that I love about this book is it's not just for principals. Kelly is an instructional facilitator. We've done this book study with our guiding coalition. It's written in a way that really anyone, whether you have been designated a leader, you're wanting to be a leader, you're serving on a guiding coalition. This book has a lot of information about really more about the PLC work and how to organize that work. Okay, so a fun fact about me as we get started in here. I love concerts. I specifically love Dave Matthews. And listen, if he's anywhere in the vicinity, I'm going to go see him. But I just want you to stop for a second and just think about concerts or a sports event or anything where there's going to be a crowd that's organized. And what makes that event worthwhile? I'm sure, like I said, I've seen Dave, goodness, I probably shouldn't admit this, but I've seen him every year since 2000, at least once a year, if not more. Some concerts are better than others. So either unmute yourself or put it in the chat. When you think about an event that you go to, what makes it worthwhile? What makes some shows better than other shows? So for example, I really love to go see him in Dallas for very specific reasons. So just kind of think through what makes a performance better than another. What is it about it? Since we're a small group, you can either chat it, or if you just want to unmute yourself and let us know, what are some things that make it worth your time? Oh, Susan, we need to go together. He's my guy. My husband has pretty much stopped going with me. Like, he's like, I can't even hang with you anymore.
That's so sad.
So the people that you go with, okay.
A Dave show, I'll just speak about Dave.
Yeah,
like his shows,
do.
The audience, the crowd is like a big happy family.
Yeah.
You don't do that just one time. And so
no, you don't.
It's just a fun, happy time.
So we recently went to the Pilgrimage Music Festival in Franklin. And we talked whenever we were there about what it was that made that show so special. And it's not just the performer. You think about how well is it organized? Are there plenty of ushers to tell you where to go and where your seats are? Do you know who to go see for directions? Is it a well-planned schedule? Nothing drives me crazier than if they say that the show's supposed to start at 8 and I'm still sitting there at 8:45 or 9. I know something is happening backstage that's disorganized. So we bring that up because the PLC and the PLC at work is not new. And a lot of times, if you're starting this process, you probably have people on your staff that say, and I promise I'm about to tie this back to Dave. You have people on your staff that say, oh, we've been there, we've done that. So as a leader, you have to stop and think. There may be people on your staff that when they hear PLC, it may not have the positive connotation that you want it to have. Now, I will say, thankfully, we are in a state that has done a tremendous job of leading this process, but what is going to be different this time? And that comes through our leadership. I tie that back. I said that I love to go see the show in Dallas. It's well organized. They always start on time. We tie that back to how can the same experience, the same goal, we may have no, my slides aren't going to move. Are y'all seeing my slides move? No.
It's still on Dave.
Oh. Okay, we're not. It's frozen. Uh-oh. Let me see if I can get. Guys, we're going to have a rope. Oh, here, maybe it'll. There we go. So you think about, if you think about one school that's leading the PLC process and another one, why can one be more effective than the other? Why are some performances better than other? It all comes back to that organization and that communication. So what separates effective leaders from those with ineffective practices is the leader's ability to stay focused on the task and the right work. So this book really explores, are you focused on the right work? And how do you know? And if you're not, what are you going to do differently this time?
At the beginning of the book, I'm just going to kind of lead you into the intro of this book, and when you get your copy, if you don't already have one, the authors start out talking about Spider-Man. And I have a 6th grade son, so we are all about any Marvel movies, DC, any of the superheroes in our house. And one of the quotes from the Spider-Man movie, if you're familiar with it, it's right there on the screen: with great power comes great responsibility. And in that movie, if you're familiar with it, Peter Parker gets bit by the spider, now is a superhero, has all these new powers, and he's having a hard time just not knowing how to control those powers, how to appropriately use his new powers. And so he's got to figure out how to harness this new responsibility and these great powers. And so eventually, him relying on the insight of his Uncle Ben and others to learn how to utilize his powers better is what made him great. And so the bottom line with that is he didn't do it all alone. And that's the thing, I think, just even me, I'm not in an administrative position right now. I'm a facilitator, but even as just facilitating the instruction in our building, I realize that every day, even the moments that I try to here comes Super Kelly in here, I'm going to, save the day with instruction in our school, that I can't do it alone. And so it's the same for us. So our challenge is how do we harness this power that we have, but also be able to share that? And that's the biggest thing to me. And when I went through this book, is to figure out how to share this power so that we have that culture that's focused, organized, consistent, where our teachers are collaborating and we're making the right decisions, and using it for the greater good, which ultimately is for our students. And so that's what I love about this book, is it's very, it leads us from going through assuming that things are working out through our day to being really intentional and making sure that everything's in line.
Absolutely. I think while you were speaking, I was just scrolling through here, and I think that I may notice some of my friends from Sheridan on here. So hi to Sheridan. Sheridan's the school that I get to work with, and I love every minute of it. Okay, so this book is divided up into 8 different areas. And why 8? I had a chance to visit with Karen and actually Jeannie on this, and some of the things, and this is in the book, but I thought that this was a really neat approach. Why did they choose 8? 8 represents in numerology abundance, harmony, and balance, which isn't that what we're looking for in our school, in our leadership? That's what we want. We want that balance. And as leaders, if we take it all on, we get distracted. We're not effectively communicating. We're really going to lose that balance. So that's what we're hoping for. Also, this is kind of cool. They said whenever you turn the 8 on the side, it looks like an infinity symbol. And so this work that we're doing, it's never ending. There's no break in it, because we don't work with products. We work with people, and that changes. And where we are in our journey, and those that you serve and lead, where they are in their journey is different. So this process continues. Another fun fact is they both really like hockey, and their favorite players are number 8. So this book is divided up into 8 different areas. And one of the things that it really challenges you to focus on is how often are you distracted from the work that you intend to do each day? How intentional are you? Do you make a plan for how to spend your day, your week? Does your staff know where your focus is in each day, in each year? So the first area is that achieving focus and staying intentional. I think that we would all agree that that has really been challenged during COVID. Our world got turned upside down, and there for a while, I imagine all of us were kind of in a survival mode. But that is when it is more important than ever to ensure that we are staying intentional with what we're wanting to do. So the really cool thing in this book, and it changed the way that I focus on things, everything is divided up into 8s. At the end of each chapter, it will ask you and challenge you, what are you going to do in the next 8 seconds, in the next 8 days, 8 weeks, 8 months, or 8 months. So around achieving focus and staying intentional, if you're to that point where you're just, read through the chapter, slow down, reflect, and what can I do in the next 8 days, 8 minutes to get back on focus. And now as a leader, that's really how I approach things. When I make my to-do list, I think about what can I get done in 8 days, and then I make sure that I work on that. I really like the part about what can you do in 8 months. There's a principal that I'm working with, and he had about 4 pages of things that he wanted to accomplish. And I said, oh boy, we got to get that prioritized. And so we went through and started thinking through, what can you actually do this year? Don't forget about what else you want to accomplish. And that's where the 8-month list comes into play. What can you get done in 8 weeks? And let's prioritize your list from there. I'm sure that all of us have heard really, really great ideas. And how many of you, or is it just me, the next year you go, oh gosh, remember when we said we were going to do X that we learned at a PD and we forgot about it? But it's because we weren't keeping our focus and staying intentional. So when you get the book and you get into it, the end of every chapter, in order to keep that focus and stay intentional, it will ask you to reflect in terms of, again, 8 minutes, 8 days, 8 weeks, 8 months.
And then what we want to do is just kind of give you an overview of each of those chapters. Each of those 8 focuses, like Sarah said, is focused on in one of the chapters. And so the second chapter is on establishing and maintaining your focus. So being more intentional with that, and like Sarah said, the times that we've been through in these past couple of years, staying focused is more important than ever, and it's been challenged. And even the systems that we have in place. And that's what this chapter is on. So if you're having a hard time figuring out, where do I need to stay focused? Could it be because the structures and the systems and the practices aren't in place in the first place? And so that's what this chapter is going to help us dig into, is to make sure that those are in place, that they make sense, they're working for us, and that they're known and used by everyone. Many of those systems that we had in place have been challenged and have needed to be changed. And so if you're in that, I guess just kind of that area, that gray area right now, trying to figure out how, we've gone from COVID to virtual to hybrid to, where are we now? Do we need to make new systems? Do we need to change some of those? That's one of the things our guiding coalition at the end of last year, we were just looking at, okay, what did we have to change? But what changes were great? What do we want to bring on board because of this? And, trying to focus on those positives. So in this chapter, like I said, we will focus on how we do need systems in place and all following them, having that consistent application, and especially the clear expectations, not. And a lot of times mixed messages get sent, not intentionally, because we assume that everybody understands what's expected or why. And so there's a great even section on that, just making sure you're even intentional in your messages, not assuming. And they really focus on very specific areas of the school, just the organization of it. Things to keep in place for a sense of order, making sure the safety of our school is a top priority, and we're intentional about the systems we have in place for that. And then just also as we build the community, building and being intentional on the trust and respect and belonging among staff members, among families that are in the school, and even the students. So that'll be the focus of chapter 2, just knowing where to start, even if you don't have those protocols and systems, and making sure we're clear in our messages.
Awesome. Okay, the next chapter is focused on building that shared leadership. I think this chapter probably spoke to me the most. If we have principals on here, I thought that it was my job to carry the weight of the whole school, especially whenever we started the work at the PLC. And I wanted to have all the answers. I wanted to tell them exactly how it needed to be done because I thought that's what they expected from me. I thought that if I tried to put it on them, that I would get that pushback. And so whenever I read this chapter, and I was being guided by Karen, and she said, Sarah, this is going to fall. The work that you're wanting to do with the PLC is going to fall flat if you continue to carry the load. And it was very true. Whenever we would have our team meetings, a question would come up and everybody would just turn and look at me and wait for me to have the answers because I was the one answering all of the questions. So leading a district or school does not mean leading alone. A true leader of a PLC is going to develop that shared leadership to ensure that shared ownership of school improvement. Because our goal ultimately is that when I walk away from this position, the work continues. That's when you know that you're on the right track. When you as a leader can step back and they are making decisions that are very in line with your vision and your mission, and frankly, what you probably would have decided. So this chapter, our Guiding Coalition did this as a book study together, and we really worked on this chapter together because the next step is that you want to build that capacity in your Guiding Coalition. But again, those leaders will change. So you basically want that leadership to trickle all the way down. And so we really worked hard on this of just, I wanted to build that capacity in them. I wanted to be able to step back and pass it over to them. And we're to the point now that there are very few decisions that are not really made from the Guiding Coalition when it comes through that PLC work. When you get your book, if you don't have it, I think two of the most powerful pages in this book are page 74 and 75. And if you want to write that down, and as soon as you get it, turn to those pages, because on those pages, where we struggled and where we were struggling is what is a team supposed to be discussing all of the time? We knew we'd sit together and plan, but where do we go from there? So we use page 74 and 75. It breaks up the 4 critical questions and it gives guidance for your teams. Man, that is powerful, because if you can go over that and you have a clear understanding of that with your team, if you're a leader, you're going to be okay if you step back and you don't have to be in all of the team meetings because you know that they are carrying on the work. So we took those 2 pages, we blow them up, and that is in our planning room. And that is how we started to build that capacity in our team to be able to support that process. Because it's not that they didn't want to do the right work. I wasn't building them up enough to do that right work. So this chapter is really on building that shared leadership. It will walk you through how to guide the work of the team. I'll tell you something else that I found after I read that chapter. I spent, and listen, y'all may be in a better place than me, and you may say, Sarah, we already know this, but I'm going to share it with you anyway. I spent most of my time in classroom observations because that's what we learned. That's where you need to be, and you need to be giving them that feedback there. I do agree with that. But when you think about building that capacity in others, the classroom is after the fact. The build leadership is really going to happen during that planning, during that data review. So I shifted the way that I supported the team because of this chapter and spent the majority of my time at first in their planning meetings. Then by the time I got to the classroom observation, we were celebrating what I had seen happen during that team meeting. And that's really discussed in that chapter. So building shared leadership, I will say was a weakness of mine at the beginning because I thought I needed to have the answers. And now I do spend quite a bit of time speaking and coaching other principals through that build leadership because of what I learned through this chapter of the book.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if there's any other facilitators or just classroom teachers in with this group, but for me, this is one of the chapters that I want to dig in more, because as a facilitator, I feel like a lot of teachers come to me, and how Sarah said, like in the meetings at first, like, well, what do we do? All eyes turn on her. Even last week when I was working with our second grade team, we were just digging into some writing standards, actually, like in those pages that Sarah was saying, answering, doing some of the work for critical question 1 of just what do we want our kids to be able to do. And it was kind of one of those moments too, all eyes are on me. And so I'm wanting to learn more through this too, of how I can empower the teams that I'm working with directly to take on more of the work instead of me taking everything off their plates, which is what I'm wanting to do right now. It's such a busy, crazy time. It's like, hey, let me do that. I know I want you to focus on the instruction. But chapter 4 is going to lead us into how are we making decisions, and how are we taking action in our school, setting those goals, making decisions based on the data, the actual data. And not, one of the things that I love that they speak about, and we'll dig into it more when we get there, is knowing your current reality, but also when you are making these decisions, are we relying more on our experience or opinions of others to guide us through our next steps, or to guide us through those decisions? Even sometimes it's hard for me, like, well, when I was in the classroom, I did this and it worked great and it was awesome, but did the kids learn from that? And, if the data shows the kids are learning, we want to keep that up. And another thing too, that we, sometimes we get so inundated with data, and we have all this information, but then it's, what do we do with it? Making sure that we are truly looking at the right data, the right evidence, and then using that in the way that's best for us. Looking for the root causes of things, not just saying, oh, they didn't get it, but really digging in where there's going to be really great application of how to figure out the root causes, and then using that data, not just to say, well, we looked at it, but to truly make next steps. Like, how is this this work? How is this helping us reach our goals? And if it's not, then what do we need to do next? And there's some great tools, and again, at the end of each of the chapters, of just some great reflection questions that we'll dig into when we get there.
Kelly, on this chapter, I'll be really honest, this was a hard chapter for us to go through with our guiding coalition, because of what you just said around opinion versus experience versus actual data. There were a lot of things, myself included, that we were bringing to the table and making decisions on, because that's the way it had been. And, we were addressing some things that we thought were still concerns of ours, but we hadn't gone back to really look at the data to talk about the process, or talk about the progress that we were making. So the tools that she's talking about, whenever you get this book, there are a lot of things in here that are reproducibles. And talking about the data and talking about your current reality. Sometimes if you just throw the question out there and say, what's our current reality? People's response is good or bad, but are we directing them to what all goes into determining your current reality? So they have this really great tool that gives you different areas. I'm showing this to y'all like y'all can actually see it. But anyway, it's on page 88. It gives you really great tools to guide your conversation around current reality. And I had to, as a leader, say, okay, math department, is that your opinion, or where is your data to support it? And boy, just that question alone, when they knew the next time they had to come back with some data, it really changed how we were looking at things. But here's something else that came out of that for our culture. We found really concrete things to celebrate that we had overlooked because we were only relying on our opinion. And I don't know about you, but February is the shortest month, but it's always the hardest month. And I don't know why that is. So looking at your current reality throughout the year and finding that concrete evidence those are things that you can celebrate. And right now, getting us up to spring break, look for those things and really dig into where you are as a school at this time. I just had to throw that out there because I remember having those conversations, and it really changed the way that we would approach things. Okay. Okay. Prioritizing the student. I love this statement that they have, that we put the students first, is a noble statement. And that's probably probably for a lot of us in our mission statement. But what does it actually look like when you've done the work of, when you're looking at the 4 pillars with the vision, the mission, the goals, and then your collective commitments? Our mission statement prioritized the student. But when we looked at our collective commitments, which are the actions around our mission and our vision, we didn't have too much in there that really addressed this. And we were doing great things at our school, but were all of our practices really around prioritizing the student, or was it around tradition or prioritizing the teacher? So this chapter is a great chapter for you to look at your practices. They ask some fantastic reflective questioning around putting the students first. And it says that it's critical for all school leaders to demonstrate an unwavering commitment to the success of your school. Then it gives you some different things that you usually find in a traditional school and how to address those. And we all know, if you've done any work with PLC, all means all, and you better believe that. But does all mean all in your school? Do you have equitable practices for all? Many of us right now are starting to, or we have already looked at our master schedule for next year. Does your schedule support learning for all? Do you have it set up where students have access to tier 1, 2, and 3? That is really discussed and looked at within this chapter. One thing that we also did with this chapter that can be powerful, you know, if you build that capacity in your team members and your team leaders, they're the ones that are really going to hear from the teachers the most, aren't they? They're the ones that may hear the statements like, well, I've done all I can. That kid's just not going to be able to learn. So one of the things, which we know is not true. So one of the things in this chapter is they give statements that you will hear, and then how do you reflect on that? We did a really cool activity where we did some role playing, where I got to kind of be the teacher that was just over it, and I don't need that kid in my class anymore, and just took some of the statements and that you can find in here, and we took this chapter and we really had good discussion around how do you respond to that to show that we are truly prioritizing the student. Because again, guys, that's a statement we all make. You know, we're here for the kids, but do all of your current practices and conversation in your team meetings really center around that you are prioritizing that student? Some of the reflective questions that they go through in here is just around, have you within your classroom created an equitable environment? What does your handbook say? What are your policies say? Are you sending, as a leader, are you sending mixed messages by saying the decisions are based on what is best for students, but you're eliminating a certain group of students? So it's got some really great tools in here for this chapter on how to prioritize. All right, Kelly, passing it back to you, sister.
Yes. Okay. So the next chapter is going to focus on leading instruction. And this is the one chapter that I, as an instructional facilitator, love the most. But reading it through the lens of trying to put myself in my administrator's shoes too, as I was reading this, it helped me to see and revisit how important it is that if any of you administrators have facilitators in your school or coaches, to being on the same page here. You know, I go into classrooms as much as I can. In fact, I was in there this morning, and it was interesting because I walked in and a few teachers are like, "Do you need something? Or do you know, and I'm like, no, I'm just here to hang out. I'm seeing how we're doing, meeting our goals and things like that." But having that alignment as far as what the instructional expectations are in the school, so that everybody's on the same page. Are those instructional expectations clear? Have they been shared? It kind of goes back to being intentional and making sure that even in this area, there are no mixed messages. And then how, like I said, as an IF too, as a facilitator, just working together with the school leaders to make sure if there are some areas for opportunities of growth in instruction in the school, like how can those leaders that you have in the school help to improve those. So understanding what quality instruction looks like in your school and knowing that and supporting that is very important. I know a lot of times I've been in, well, for our district, sorry, let me just back up a little bit. One of my roles too, not only at the school level, but district level, is being over elementary and math curriculum. And so I lead a lot of professional development. And when I'm leading and working with these teachers and learning together, when the administrators are there too, it makes such a huge difference. And it's very impactful for the teachers as well, seeing that, hey, what we're learning, what we're wanting to apply in our classrooms is important to our leaders as well. But not only just having the instructional expectations, but I love how this chapter also, it's going to tie in just the right work of professional learning communities and what that collaborative culture should look like. And do your teams truly understand, like, these moments that we've put in place, like going back to the beginning of the book, the structures and the systems and the protocols that we have in place to allow you to have this time to collaborate together. Do we really understand why we're doing that? Because that's going to help impact our instruction. But just thinking about, they're going to take us through scenarios to help us reflect on how we're leading and supporting that instruction. And it goes really into detail of, we're going to get to learn about a principal in Georgia who really took this to the next level. And I mean, just how she laid out what her expectations were as far as instruction or school, and how she verbalized those and communicated those to the staff, and just how she really helped to support that in the school.
I would also, before I go on to the next one, I'm going to tell on myself again. When we started this work of a PLC, we had some really good, it felt like some really good planning meetings, some really good discussion. Our data wasn't moving. There was a disconnect between what we were planning and talking about and what was actually happening in the classrooms. And I don't know if you have ever felt that, but sure, we know that, like, we're going to look at the data, but I'm really just looking at yours and saying, oh, that's nice, but I'm going to go back to my classroom and do the same old thing that I've always done. This chapter, if you feel like you're in that rut, this is a great chapter to study for that. It was my job as a leader, because your teachers can't go from room to room to room to see what's happening all the time, but I could go in and I could look at 2 different classrooms and say, hey guys, I know this was the intention, or this was a strategy that we discussed, but teacher A, let me tell you what that looked like in teacher B's classroom. And now let me give you a chance to go over and observe teacher B, because it was really awesome. I feel like that is my job as a leader, to communicate that from teacher to teacher, because they've got their hands full with who's in their classroom. We have to be that communication for both of them. And I know I already mentioned it once, but guys, I love the chart on 74 and 75. That helped us through, because our team meetings, when we first started, they stopped at questions 1 and 2. Why is that? Because every traditional school, we're going to plan and we're going to make assessments. And that's kind of where it stopped. But leading that instruction, You got to make sure that you're going through all 4 questions, and then you are giving that feedback for how that looked in the classrooms. Okay, so I want to talk about fostering communication. Despite our very best efforts as leaders, we aren't always the best communicators. This is a crucial piece of intentional leadership. Goodness, how many times have we needed to roll out something really important and we didn't pay very much attention to the schedule, and we plan it for an after school meeting and everyone's exhausted and it fell flat, or have a meeting and you go, gosh, that really could have been an email and it wasn't, or just your timing of the communication. I think some of our best intentions fall because we don't really read the room. We don't really read the time of year. And is this a good time to roll out something new? Should it be done whole staff? Should it be done in a smaller group? Should this be a one-on-one conversation? This chapter really talks about all of your avenues for communicating. For our Guiding Coalition meeting, after we did the study of this chapter, what really made an impact on me is before we leave, there are certain things that I say that I'm assuming everyone heard it the way that it was in my head, and they didn't. They took it a completely different way. And we remember that old game of telephone. By the time it goes from my head, out my mouth to the Guiding Coalition, and then back through there, the teachers have a completely different perspective of what I meant to communicate. So we now end all of our Guiding Coalition meetings, and we actually do this at our district level meetings. Before we leave, we make a list. What are we going to communicate? What's the date that we're going to communicate this by? And how are you going to communicate it? Some things we know, they're not going to come across like you want them to in an email. It needs to be said face to face. The other thing that I really was a slap in my face, and I'm going to share a story on this, is they give some really awesome tools for how you are listening and responding to your staff. I nod my head a lot. And sometimes me nodding my head is just me listening to you. So I'll just tell the story real fast. I had a teacher in here, and she needed my attention, and she wasn't really getting my attention because what was I doing? I was busy with other things, and I was like, yes. And I was nodding, and she said, okay, so you agree with what I'm saying? And I thought, I don't have a clue what you just said. Like, I wasn't even really listening, and now you think I'm agreeing with you. So slowing down. How are you an active listener? Kelly and I had some experience with this when we visited Solution Tree, and I had to really stop nodding because it looked like I was agreeing, but I wasn't. It was just my way of listening. So how are you listening to your staff? How are you communicating? What is the timeline for how you are communicating? We're going to study that in this chapter. And are your priorities crystal clear? I should have put a 4th question on there and say, how do you know they're crystal clear? Some of the things that I do now is after a Guiding Coalition meeting and we've gone through how we want to communicate really important information, I'll just go around the campus and just do a spot check. Hey, did Miss Franklin talk to you about this testing schedule that's coming up or whatever, just to kind of check how the communication is going to make sure that we're all on the same page. And again, we even go so far as to say, this needs to be an email that comes from me as a leader, or this needs to be communicated from you as a colleague on a team together. So that chapter will really explore all of those avenues for communication.
Which leads into the last chapter. Not saying this is the last thing you would tackle, but what I love about all the first 7 areas for leadership is everything goes back to being intentional and building that community. And so this last chapter says, okay, let's go outside of our walls now. We've worked on things to get in place inside of our building, but how can we go beyond? But even in this chapter, it starts though, again, with what's going on in the building and what type of leader you are. And I love, and it's not to me even for a principal. So as a facilitator, I'm reading this, they talk about, and we'll dig into it when we get there, is how are you leading? Are you leading because I've got this position now and here I am? Or they call it by position or by permission. And I can't wait for us to dig into this because I want to get your views on this when we get there. But just, are you leading because I've got this title now? Or have you put all these systems in place and you've been so intentional with everything that you have built that community, you have built that trust, and now your family there at your school is giving you permission to lead them? And so it's the difference in that, and really focusing in on that. And again, truly knowing your why, knowing that why before you get to the what, and specifics to keep in mind when communicating outside of your walls. And you start getting families involved, but even community members involved. And they really focus in on 4 big areas that we'll look at, making sure that your parents and your community are clear on your standards and your curriculum, your goals and the learning that's going to happen in your building, your school discipline practices, and your celebrations. And all that can happen if everything beforehand has been put into place. And so, so thinking about that, are you a strong community builder, not just outside the walls, but inside? And then what practices do you have in place? And they're going to give some great examples of things to apply to.
When we went through the process to become a model PLC school, there was a lot of conversation around how much does your community know what you're doing? And, you know, I don't expect them, because they're not all educators. If we say that we're a PLC school, they're not going to know what all of that means. But to be able to communicate with them what it means to be a PLC school is that no matter the classroom that your student is placed in, they're going to get the same education and the same experience. If your student is struggling, because all means all, for sure in our school, we've got interventions in place to accelerate their learning. If your student is on grade level, we've got things in place to extend their learning. So again, that communication doesn't just have to say, oh, we're a PLC school, and you think they know what that means because it just sounds good. What does it mean for their student? I think that whenever we went through that process, that really made me stop and reflect and say, how much does the community of Morrilton know what's really going on here? And that did make a big difference for us. And to have parents come in and go, gosh, it feels different around here, it just feels really good. But that wouldn't come if we weren't bringing them into our process. Okay, so we have given you a really quick overview of the 8 areas that are presented in this book. I just want to be quiet for a minute and make your list. If you want to share it with us, you can, or if you just want to jot down. I feel really good about prioritizing the student, but I want to learn more about building that shared leadership. Make yourself a note. If you want to put it in the chat box, feel free to do that. So just look over that list and just reflect on where you want to grow and what you want to celebrate. And if you are okay, I'm going to switch to the next slide because our time is very precious. This is when we will be really diving into each of those chapters. So what's really cool about this book is you don't have to start on page 1 and work all the way through. Every single chapter serves as its own learning chapter. So because your time is precious, that is our calendar. If you really want to just hear about building shared leadership, like I said, but you feel pretty good about prioritizing the student, Mark your calendars for March 29th. That is when we will be diving into the chapter. Hopefully, you would have had a chance to read the chapter by then, and you don't just have to listen to Kelly and I, although Kelly, I love listening to you. That will give everyone a chance to share, because the whole purpose of a PLC is for us to learn from each other. I want to learn as much from you. I want to steal from you as much as I can, so we can grow together. So that is our calendar for when we will be presenting on those chapters. We hope to, with each of those, share with you some tools that we will be working through, so you will have a hard copy. The authors of this book, they are so fantastic that they left us with some really good reproducibles that we're going to hopefully be able to send out to you, so we can work through some of this together, because again, this isn't just about us talking, it's all of us being able to work and learn together. So if you are okay, I'm going to switch that over if you've already marked your calendars. I hope you join us for all of them. But if not,
It'll be the same time too, this 1 o'clock time.
Yeah, same
For
time.
each of those.
Okay, and this is just really what I think this is the big takeaway from each chapter. If you read through and you say, this is what this book is going to challenge you to do. Oh, I think that data is really important. Well, if the way that you're spending your time, you're not looking at data and making action plans consistently, then it's a distractor. How are you spending your time? Focus requires aligning your actions with your focus. How do you determine your daily areas of focus, and what are some distractors you struggle with on a daily basis? I called out my friends in Sheridan, and we had a good discussion over this the last time that I was in their district, about just when do you stop as a leader and plan your day? I used to think that I could come in the morning and plan my day right before it started. Well, that fell flat. So just, if prioritizing a student's important, when do I plan that in my schedule? Does it just happen just when I have an extra 15 minutes, or do I actually prioritize that? As a leader, do those that you serve and lead, do they know where your priorities are? Do they know that when you are moving, when you are going to classroom observation, that is important, that you're not distracted, because they know they're going to get good feedback from you. So this book will really challenge us to look at what is distracting us. I'd shared this with Kelly earlier. There is a, Kelly, what chapter was the time study?
I think it's chapter 1.
Oh, yeah, right at the beginning. One of the things that we did as a guiding coalition is we did a time study, where this is what we intended to happen. This is how our day went. And then we looked for the distractors in between. Do you know what our guiding coalition realized they were doing? They were the biggest distractors. They would, as soon as their prep time started, they may go find someone and check on their day and see how things were going. Well, they were distracting other teachers from getting to what they needed to get to. So it's a great chapter to join us, to really look at your day and where are you spending your time. How much, and it will encourage you to time yourself. How much time are you spending in emails? I went and bought myself like a rolly desk, because I know emails are important, but being visible is also important. I take my desk out into the T zone and I can answer emails there, because I realize these emails have to get answered. But if people don't see me in the hallway, they don't really know that they're a priority for me. So just things like that we will study. But this book really will encourage you to look at where the distractors are and help you become more intentional. This one's me too, right?
Yeah, we can just.
So one question that I want you to think about before we join next time is, how do you believe the teachers in your school perceive your focus? Do they know what your focus is? And are your actions aligned with what you deem important? Do you think that staff members understand where you are tight and loose? Or are they overwhelmed with the feeling that everything is important? And think about those questions. If you need to take a picture of this slide before we move on, think about those questions and what are you doing? How are you spending your time that reflect on what is important to you. I know that things get in the way that we cannot avoid. A parent comes in, you really need to address them. Other things just come up in the middle of the day. But how far in advance are you planning how you want to spend your time, and what is your plan B when that falls through? And then just think about, what will you do in the next 8 minutes, 8 days, or 8 weeks to make an impact? We hope that you will join us as we go through this book study. And because I really believe in what they share with us. They share everything in this book feels very, very practical. And I think that that's why I liked it. You will read through examples and go, oh my gosh, I'm doing that. And I didn't even realize there was a different way to approach that. And so anyway, I hope that you join us. This is our contact information. If you want to reach out, any questions, I would love to hear from you before our next time. If you get your book and there's something that's just really, you want to talk about before we get to that part, share that with me. That is my cell phone number as well. I usually always have my phone on me, and I'm very rarely in my office in front of my computer. So that's the best way to get me. Listen, I have my Twitter on there, and my Twitter is very boring. I don't share very much, but I will tell you, I use Twitter as a fantastic professional development tool. So if you follow me, all you're going to see are a whole lot of retweets from other people that are doing fantastic work. And there's just great things out there. So that is why that is on there, not because I'm doing anything amazing on Twitter, but I do share some really great tools that have made an impact on my leadership.
Same here with the contact information and the Twitter as well. And one of the things I just want to leave you with, I don't know, are any of you guys, like I'm an avid reader, love reading. And I usually have, honestly, about 6 or 7 books going at the same time. Like, it drives my coworkers crazy. Like, how do you keep it all online? But I'm never one of those. And it drives me crazy when someone turns to the end of the book first and like reads the last chapter first or the last page. I don't know if any of you are that way. But not to give a spoiler alert, but there's a quote at the end of this book, but it drives everything. But and it's all what PLC work is all about in a nutshell. But it just kind of speaks to the fact that as the adults improve, then so do the schools improve, and then so does the student achievement. And that is what it's really all about and what we're here for. So I cannot wait to just keep learning alongside of you guys and bring some friends next time. Yeah, but any questions before then, just, yeah, shout out, holler at us.
Hey, Sarah,
Yes.
we do have a question.
Okay.
Okay, as we're going forward and we're planning the PLC work, we have staff who have already decided that they'll be somewhere else next year. So recommendation, do we include them or do we not include them? Which just feels awkward, but that's a question that's been asked.
I will tell you that, and this kind of goes for if you're working with I have staff that, okay, gosh, what's the best way to word this with people that I don't know that are on here? I just approach everybody with the intention that they want to be here and they want what's best for kids. Because here's the thing, if they're not going to be with you, they are still affecting kids in another district. Let them learn right alongside you.
Okay.
You know, I have 2 teachers that are retiring this year, and I'm so sad. I love them so much. They are getting the same investment from me when I know this is their last year, because there are students sitting in their class right now. And so I still include them the entire time, because they're going to be affecting students somewhere. If I have teachers, some of the best piece of advice that I got was always approach teachers as if they have the same best intentions that you do. And so even teachers that are difficult, and I know maybe you're not talking about difficult teachers, but just teachers that are difficult or teachers that aren't where you want them to be yet, I approach them as if they are just as excited and on board with me, because you want that to rub off on them, and you want to also just lead by example. Candace, that was a really long answer for you just asking something very specific, but my answer is still include them, because they're going to be going somewhere. Now, here's the other thing that we have done. I had a Guiding Coalition member that she was going to go home and raise babies, and we knew that after the year. At semester, she stayed with us. Plus, I brought in one more teacher that was going to serve the following year. And so they learned together. But I still did go ahead and include them because she still had kids sitting in her room.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I'll add on to that. I'm principal over at AR Elementary in Springdale, and we're a year and a half into the grant work with Solution Tree. And some teachers thought that they would leave, and maybe the opportunities weren't all there that they thought were there, and so they're still here. And so now those same teachers have signed up for PD opportunities over the summer with Solution Tree, because they truly believe in the work. And so there was a mind shift going through the process. So it's worth the investment, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I was going to say too that when you get into this work and you're doing the right work, and I knew that we were doing the right work, I also know that some of the ways that we operate and work, it may not always be for everybody, but it's going to be for this school. And so just stay, oh no, battery is running low. Last time this happened, it died in the middle of a webinar. So let me get this plugged in. That is why vision and mission and staying true to those collective commitments are so important, and don't waver from that. Like I said earlier, we're not working with product, we're working with people, and they have different mindsets, and they have personal experiences that they're bringing into this. But when you know what your vision and your mission is, and that's what you're going to work toward, like our friend from Fort Smith, I think, you said Springdale. We also had people that were like, I don't know, but then we just stuck with them, and they said, oh wait, okay, now I see the light toward what we're working toward. So, okay, are there any more questions? Because we've kept you now 2 minutes over. Okay, if not, guys, thank you for joining us. Thank you for the question. And we really hope to see you soon. And we don't want this, when we get into the chapters, we don't want this to just be us presenting. We want this to be a true book study where we are sharing and brainstorming together and looking at what the authors say about this work. A little bit more about the authors, and then we'll go. Karen was superintendent of the largest school district in Canada. So she has been teacher, principal, all the way up. And then Jeannie Spiller actually serves in the district that
Chicago.
Right out of Chicago. Yes. Mm-hmm. And she had worked in the district or the school that fed into where Rick DeFore was. Mm-hmm. So she has been doing this work for a while, and they're working across the country. So what's really amazing is they bring experience from all over the country and all different experiences whenever they wrote this book. So anyway, I'm through talking. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you guys next time.
Yes. Great to meet you guys.